About 10,000 years ago, man discovered agriculture. And about 9,999 years ago, he discovered how to ferment what he grew and make alcohol. Got pretty good at it, too. And now some countries are closely identified with his specialties, like Scotland with Scotch, Poland with vodka. For Americans, it's bourbon. And some of the smoothest around is made right here by Maker's Mark. Migrado, Kentucky. Population, less than 1,000. History, way back. All the way to the 18th century when settlers discovered limestone-rich soil and water that were perfect for growing the perfect grain for the perfect whiskey. The town took its name from the Sisters of Loretto, America's first native order of Roman Catholic nuns, established in the war year of 1812. Their way with growing winter wheat later proved to be a godsend to the distillers of Maker's Mark. The road's not really called Bourbon Street, but it should be. It leads to the oldest continually operating distilleries in America. Company president Bill Samuels Jr. belongs to a long and distinguished family of bourbon makers.
This was Dad's concept, and before he went off to that great distillery in the sky, he wanted to be able to take the bitter taste out of bourbon. We had been making bourbon since 1783 here in Kentucky. I'm the 7th generation of Dad's family to operate the family distillery.
The word bourbon is actually the name of the illustrious French royal family, but in fact, this form of whiskey was born right here in Kentucky. Most bourbons are distilled from rye, corn, and malt, but Maker's Mark substitutes wheat for the rye. The first bourbon-making Samuels was T.W., who began brewing his family's recipe in 1840. For 113 years, the Samuels bourbon was enjoyed by a select few. Then, in early 1954, Bill's dad decided to refine the refining process.
This is where Dad did his famous little ceremony. It was actually in this room to demonstrate that we were walking away from 150 years of bourbon heritage and starting over on a new trail. He burned the old family formula in that bucket sitting on a barrel of whiskey right here. We used to have drapes on those windows, and it caught the drapes on fire, and my sister just happened to be looking over and caught her hair on fire. So we had a very bad ceremony.
But a very good result. 50,000 visitors a year are treated to a tour of the distillery, which uses the best of old world methods and modern technology. Oh yeah, corn. It's tested for quality, stored until needed, and then ground to a fine powder. Instead of using hammer mills for this process, Bill insists on doing it the old-fashioned way.
It's the only active roller mill in the distilling industry today, but it saved our life because it allowed us to keep that gentle crafting.
You can actually put that on the label, Maker's Mark, a kinder, gentler bourbon.
This is where the magic starts. Right now we're going to drop in the grain. We're going to give you the honors. First grain in is corn. Now, if you mess this up, you got to shovel it back in there.
Hey, I've been shoveling stuff for a long time, Bill. The tubs where the corn mash is made are heated to 212 good old-fashioned degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature at which water boils. Now good old-fashioned yeast is added. In fact, very old-fashioned. This mother yeast is derived from the same culture T.W. Samuels began using in 1842. Fermentation takes place in cypress vats. Well, I think somebody must have fallen in because I see the bubbles coming up.
No. This is 4-day beer that's now ready to be distilled. It came from the cooker as cooked mash, and we brought in some spent beer from the previous day's distillation, and we drop in the yeast. The yeast feeds on the sugar and gives off alcohol, gives off CO2, which are the bubbles that you see. Taste it and see what you think. This is beer.
Tastes like beer.
Yeah, without the fizzy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, without the carbonation.
So you didn't know you had to make beer before you make whiskey?
No idea.
That's God's law. just has to be that way.
I think that was the 11th commandment, wasn't it?
It should have been. It did. No that.
Those beautiful copper tanks are called spirit safes. You get the feeling that anything coming out of them would be tasty.
After we make beer,
Yeah?
we run the beer through the column still, which is a unique American invention and unique to bourbon.
Heating the beer releases a vapor, which is then collected and cooled, and finally turned into a clear liquid called low wine.
And from there, the low wine is put in a doubler where it's redistilled, and that's what I've got for you right here. This is brand new, 1 minute old, 130 proof, almost bourbon whiskey.
They don't call it White Lightning, they call it White Dog. Pull Rover.
We call that Kentucky grappa.
Very good, that's tasty.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, I'm glad I had breakfast this morning.
Oh, this is good on cornflakes.
The White Dog is sent off to a nice 6-year nap in charred oak barrels, which are what give the bourbon its caramel color and mellow taste. By law, nothing else can be added now. Yet to come, though, in the small batch brewing process, is charcoal filtering. And finally, bottling. This is where the influence of Bill's mother can be seen. Margie wanted to class up the old family bourbon, beginning with its name. Maker's Mark came from her fine pewter pieces, which always carried Maker's Mark. But that's not all she did.
Mom created the package single-handedly, came up with the name, the shape of the bottle. The hand lettering was actually hers, and it's now become an international type style. She came up with the idea for the wax. She collected old 19th century cognac bottles, and they were all sealed in wax, and she thought it would be a nice touch. And Dad said, well, how are we going to get that stuff on the bottle? She said, same way I did. And she'd worked in the basement with our deep fryer. We're still dipping them by hand, as you'll see. We've made zero progress.
I kind of feel like Popeye.
We usually dip 23 bottles per minute. If you want to get that wax off, you can, because it will burn.
Yeah, it's burning.
The wax is 350 degrees.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, that's hot.
Of course, after a long, hard day, the fruits of labor should taste sweet. Here's to all things made in America. Thank you. Well, here's to the corn and all who grow it.
And the nuns.
And the nuns who grow the corn.
God love them.
Get a toast to the Samuels family. Here's to Thomas Pickett.
A little bit more, just a touch. All right.